I'm going to be analysing the Apple Supplier Code of Conduct and will be revealing the working conditions in factories like Foxconn. The first sentence of the Apple Supplier Code of Conduct states that it is committed to ensuring that working conditions in Apple's supply chain are safe and that workers are treated with respect and dignity. The first two sections in the Apple Supplier Code of Conduct, and which will be my focus, are labour and human rights and health and safety. Here is the definition of fair treatment under the Labour and Human Rights section. Workers at Foxconn's Chengdu factory, which manufactures Apple products, must reportedly sign a pledge promising they will not commit suicide. This document starts off good, telling employees to take advantage of the helpline, the complaints line, or the trade union hotline. But then they note in bullet points that the employees agree to when signed. Agreeing not to harm myself or others, and agreeing that the company has acted properly in accordance with relevant laws and regulations and will not sue the company. I believe this to be inhumane treatment and definitely counts as mental coercion. In another act of inhumane treatment to a sensitive subject, after a spout of suicides in 2010 at the Shenzhen factory, nets were installed in an effort to prevent employees jumping. Another example of harsh and inhumane treatment with a stench of corporal punishment occurred on September 24, 2012, when a riot broke out at Foxconn's factory in Taiwan after a guard beat up a worker. Here is the definition of prevention of underage labour under the Labour and Human Rights section. In 2010, Mike Daisy visits the Foxconn factory in Shenzhen, and this is what he had to say about who he met during shift change.
At that gate, I met workers who were 14 years old. I met workers who were 13 years old. I met workers who were 12. Do you really think Apple doesn't know?
The same year that Mike Daisy visited China, there were 91 cases of underage labour found by Apple's audit of its suppliers. Here is the definition of working hours under the Labour and Human Rights section. An audit carried out by the Fair Labour Association, which was ordered by Apple last year, finds illegal overtime. Employees at Foxconn typically worked more than 60 hours a week during peak periods. Those who worked one shift typically work 8 hours a day, but during peak production they must work 1 to 3 hours of overtime in the evening. This is compulsory overtime, which breaches the fact that overtime shall be voluntary. In some departments at Foxconn, employees work up to 28 days a month, which clearly does not add up to at least 1 day off a week. Here's the definition of wages and benefits under the Labour and Human Rights section. The riot of 2,000 workers at the Taiwan Foxconn factory on September 24th was also related to overtime pay. On September 26th, the company released a statement saying it will ensure its duties related to employee welfare are implemented and it will make overtime payments as promised. A riot of that magnitude over overtime pay clearly demonstrates that they were not compensated for overtime at the premium rate or in any timely fashion. The audit carried out by Fair Labour Association stated that Foxconn employees typically worked over 60 hours a week during peak periods, but were paid unfair compensation for overtime. Here is a definition of occupational injury prevention under the Health and Safety section. In a report carried out by SACOM, Students and Scholars Against Corporate Misbehaviour, Foxconn and Apple failed to fulfil promises, predicaments of workers after the suicides, finds that Foxconn has 2 campuses in Chengdu, the northern campus and the southern campus. The southern campus will be the permanent site for over 250,000 workers. The southern campus is still under construction, but workers are already working there. Basic facilities in a factory are not ready, such as road lighting, locker, toilet and canteen. Construction trucks and other vehicles are around all day and create more dust when they pass by. On rainy days, the road is muddy and slippery. At night, the lighting is insufficient. Workers may fall down on the rugged road. The construction materials are piled up on the side of the road. The environment in the campus is chaotic. Here is the definition of prevention of chemical exposure under the health and safety section. A China Labour Watch report called Beyond Foxconn, Deplorable Working Conditions Characterise Apple's Entire Supply Chain states that according to workers at Foxconn, occupational hazards such as low-level radiation, chemicals and dust do exist in some areas of the factory. Although the factory provides safety training to workers, it is not very informative. The factory provides protective equipment for workers, but some workers reported that the protective equipment was inadequate and not up to standards. Workers have little faith in the equipment's effectiveness. In the report carried out by SACOM, Students and Scholars Against Corporate Misbehaviour, Foxconn and Apple failed to fulfil promises, predicaments of workers after the suicides, finds that workers do not have adequate training on usage of chemicals and do not have regular on-post health examination. A number of interviewees even complained that they suffered from allergy, but the management does not probe into the adverse health impact of workers. Workers also highlight the problem of poor ventilation and inadequate personal protective equipment. An article in the New York Times called "In China, Human Costs Are Built into an iPad" reports that some suppliers have disregard for workers' health. 2 years ago, 137 workers at Apple's supplier in eastern China were injured after they were ordered to use a poisonous chemical to clean iPhone screens. Here is a definition of occupational safety procedures and systems under the health and safety section. As I've already stated earlier, some workers at Foxconn work on a construction site. At night, the lighting is insufficient. Workers may fall down on the rugged road. The construction materials are piled up on the roadside. There are no corrective actions being implemented to eliminate their causes and to protect workers against occupational injury. Here is a definition of ergonomics under the health and safety section. An article states that the Foxconn suicides that started in 2010 are due to oppressive work conditions that include standing for 8 hours or more without a break. One worker said that he constantly wanted to drop something on the floor so he could bend down to pick it up while working. Due to the long hours standing, if he had the chance to lie or squat down on the floor, it would be the most enjoyable moment during the workday so he could get the chance to rest. The World Socialist website states that in an article called "China's Sweatshops Exploit Students," that major corporations like Foxconn engage in large-scale exploitation of students as cheap labour, with the support of Chinese authorities at every level. While the practice is justified as a form of vocational education, students spend long hours in regimented conditions carrying out routine, repetitive tasks. Most employees of Foxconn spend their day performing repetitive tasks. In 2010, a human rights group, China Labour Watch, said that because of the suicides, it surveyed worker attitudes about conditions at Foxconn in Shenzhen. "We are extremely tired with tremendous pressure," the group quoted one worker as saying. "We finish one step in every 7 seconds, which requires us to concentrate and keep working and working. We work even faster than the machines." Here is a definition of dormitory and dining under the health and safety section. The southern campus in Chengdu, which is a construction site, does not provide basic facilities like toilets, a canteen or lockers. A report carried out by SACOM last year has found that living conditions remain cramped and unpleasant. According to the report, which found 20 to 30 people typically sharing 3-bedroom apartments stocked with bunk beds, Use of high energy electrical appliances such as hair dryers, kettles and laptops is prohibited. Here is the definition of communication under the health and safety section. This section of the Code of Conduct is most certainly being violated. Health and safety is not a major concern. 137 were injured after using poisonous chemicals to clean iPhone screens, which I'm sure no safety information was provided on. The factory provides safety training to workers, but it is not very informative, so the workers do not feel as if they are receiving appropriate health and safety training. Also, as I've mentioned earlier, employees complain they suffer from allergies, but the management does not probe into the adverse health impacts of workers. There are numerous examples that prove health and safety are not a priority of Foxconn that I've already mentioned, but I hope these get my point across. The majority of points in the sections Labour and Human Rights and Health and Safety in Apple's Supplier Code of Conduct are being violated, which I feel prove that factories like Foxconn to be unethical and against human rights.